If you thought the search for scapegoats ended along with a 30-year-long civil war in Sri Lanka in 2009, it's time to think again. The country's majority Sinhalese and largest minority Tamil Hindus are no longer fighting each other, but they may both now have a new scapegoat, Sri Lanka's second largest Muslim minority. Sri Lanka has declared a state of emergency for 10 days to rein in the spread of communal violence. The government's announcement comes a day after Buddhists and Muslims clashed in the central district of Kandy. Tensions have been brewing between the two communities in Sri Lanka over the past year, with some hardline Buddhist groups accusing Muslims of forcing people to convert to Islam and vandalizing Buddhist archaeological sites. The aggression toward Muslims was primarily started by the Bodubala Sena, which is BBS, a militant Buddhist monk organization several years after the end of the war. There were severe riots in southwestern Sri Lanka's Kalutara district back in 2014. Mosques, homes, shops, factories owned by Muslims were attacked. 4 people were killed and thousands rendered homeless. Last week, at least 5 Sri Lankan Muslims were severely injured in Sri Lanka's Tamil-speaking eastern province, where Muslims are ironically in the majority. The province was formerly claimed by the terrorists LTTE as a, quote, Tamil homeland, end quote. This week, the scene of attacks has shifted to the holy Buddhist site of Kandy in the central hills of Sri Lanka. Special forces of the police and the armed forces are out in the town that houses the holiest Buddhist relic, the tooth of the Lord Buddha, and its surrounding areas. After the death of a Sinhalese man allegedly at the hands of a Muslim mob, there's simmering tension in Kandy and fears that Sinhalese and Muslim mobs may go on the rampage. Though about 35 Sri Lankan Muslims were believed to have left the island nation to join the Islamic State in previous years, Sri Lankans of all religions are famously tolerant and well assimilated into their country's unique culture and traditions. But of late, radical Buddhist groups like the BBS are on the rise again. This time, they're alleging forcible conversion by Sri Lanka's Muslims. Given a debt crisis and a much weakened coalition government in Colombo, Sri Lanka's President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, both of whom are the authors of the current so-called unity government, will have to act and act fast. That is, if they want to prevent their country's blood-soaked history from repeating itself. Joining me live on the broadcast is WION Senior Foreign Editor Padma Rao. She's joining us live from New Delhi. Padma, good evening. Thank you for speaking with us.
Good evening.
Is there a history to clashes between Muslims and Buddhists, or does this come as a surprise to you?
There's a history to clashes between ethnicities, Aisha. As we've been explaining all day at WION, there are ethnicities, there are religious groups, and there are chauvinists within all those groups. So the long civil war, which lasted almost 30 years, was essentially between two ethnic groups. But there haven't been religious clashes as such, because Sri Lanka, much like India, it's a microcosm. There are, Tamil speakers among Muslims. There are Sinhalese speakers among Muslims. There are, Christians among the Tamils. There are Hindus among the Tamils, and so it is a mix. And this is, yes, there have been precedences in the past, but they have not really been as huge and as devastating as the war between the Tamil ethnic minority of the north and east and the Sinhalese majority. Now that war is over, and we have seen riots, attacks by Sinhalese Buddhist militant groups, notably a group made of monks, which is called the Bodubala Sena. In 2014, 5 people died. That was in southwestern, southern Sri Lanka.
Right.
And, so there have been precedences, but this is an unusual state primarily because, and we've said that before, because of the ground situation amongst, ordinary people. It's about livelihoods, it's about jobs, it's about the deteriorating security situation in the country, and it's also about a very, very wobbly government which needs to get its act together.
Right. So that gives me the perfect segue into my next question, and that is this unnecessary a new pressure on this unity government between Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe, given what happened in those local polls of late?
Well, it's pressure, yes, of course. I mean, it depends on which way you look at it, whether if you're on the side of the government or if you're on the side of the opposition. And we at WION are on neither side because we are essentially foreigners and we are a foreign channel. But having said that, yes, the current government has been under all kinds of pressures and all kinds of problems. And I think the essential problem lies in the fact that the government has not been able to address, because of its own teetering coalition and because of its own internal problems and because of the growing strength of the opposition, primarily the new party, the People's Party, led by the former president, Mr. Rajapaksa. Now, he has, the recent elections, regional polls have shown that he has bounced back in a big way. There's also talk of, many MPs of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party of President Maithripala Sirisena, which is the former president's former party, also crossing over. So all this is happening in an atmosphere when there is huge external debt, when there are, there's joblessness, the economy is down, there are a lot of other things happening. And I tend to believe, after having covered Sri Lanka for 30 years, that it is a peaceful nation. It is not a violent nation by nature. They're not a violent people. And these are protests. For instance, this particular instance that sparked this particular tragic death that sparked off these riots in Kandy, it was a lorry driver, a truck driver, who was assaulted by 4 youths in an auto rickshaw, and he succumbed to his injuries. Now, this is indeed very tragic. Right. But it may just be so that it happened, the lorry driver happened to be a Sinhalese who was, and the youth in the auto happened to be Muslims. So this is a very fluid situation. And one last thing, Aisha, I would like to say is that the opposition will almost certainly blame the current government, because they will say that there was a no confidence vote up in the parliament today, and the present government orchestrated the situation somehow to avoid that vote and to be able to impose an emergency. And the current government will say that it is the opposition of Mr. Rajapaksa, whose earlier government had indeed supported sections of the Bodhabala Sena, the militant monks group. So there will be accusations flying across the bench within Parliament as well, but that is politics. I'd only like to comment on the essential nature of the Sri Lankan people. They are not a religiously violent people, and they have always lived in harmony with each other, and they even worship each other's gods and show great respect for each other's religious institutions.
All right, so there are more contours than this perhaps that meet the eye. We'll have to leave it at that for now, Padma. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us that perspective.